Kaldir. As Kaldir is now the only place I can visit, I head there. On this moon we find that Nefesh is being pursued by the Protoss and has retreated into the ice valleys. Kerrigan says that Nefesh's brood has valuable adaptations, but the only units that you can get are basic units such as roaches and hydralisks. Units that Kerrigan should have been able to acquire on Char, since Zagara should have been able to create them. Abathur says he'll need to use the local flora and fauna to make the swarm resistant to Kaldir's cold, but if the Leviathan and the Mutalisk are already resistant to this level of cold, this means he already has the genetic code he needs to upgrade the swarm. Kaldir 1. Harvest of Screams. Upon starting this mission, Kerrigan says that we need the essence of an Ursidon matriarch to allow the Zerg to adapt to the cold. Even though all Ursidons have the genetic information needed to adapt to the cold, and we already have several Zerg units that have adapted to this level of cold. We then encounter feral roaches which indicate that something is wrong with the brood that was being pursued by the Protoss. Upon encountering a Zerg base, that the Protoss didn't destroy for unknown reasons, Kerrigan is then spotted by the Protoss colonists she knew were nearby. Somehow the expedition leader knows that Kerrigan doesn't have her full swarm, and decides to attack her, even though the Protoss are a colonial force and Kerrigan has 2 planets worth of Zerg. The expedition leader also decides to contact Shakuras using Silent Spires, something they should have done when they first encountered the Zerg on this moon. Fortunately for Kerrigan, there's no time limit on this mission, so she doesn't have to worry about the Protoss actually being able to contact Shakuras. Upon death, the Protoss don't warp back to Shakuras, and despite the Protoss defeating Nefesh's brood, the Protoss have no defences against the flash freeze storms, which allows Kerrigan to destroy their base while they're frozen. Once all the spires are destroyed, the mission just ends, regardless of how many Protoss are left alive. Also, the Protoss don't have any other silent spires or long-range communication devices in their ships because that would ruin Kerrigan's plan. Finally, for no reason the Protoss are guarding Nefesh's corpse. Even if they wanted it as a trophy, it's not explained why they haven't moved it to one of their ships, rather than just leaving it on the ground. Back on the Leviathan, Kerrigan says that Nefesh lost because she ran, even though Kerrigan was only able to win this battle because the place Nefesh ran to had flash freeze storms. We're then introduced to Lasara, who doesn't explain why the Protoss are trying to colonize a barren moon so far from Shakuras. Also, Kerrigan tries to equate killing thousands of Protoss to the deaths of billions of Zerg, even though the Zerg are unthinking insectoids forced to obey Kerrigan's whims, while the Protoss are able to think for themselves. Kaldir Mission 2. Shoot the Messengers. This mission starts with the psychic Protoss being unable to detect a vast number of Zerg on the other side of the portal, or notice that the number of Protoss on Kaldir are rapidly decreasing. Since the Protoss colonists decide to put all their warp conduits in an area that's surrounded by frozen hydralisks rather than scattered throughout this moon, they're unable to get to them. So they decide that rather than send a psychic or electronic message through the conduits, they're going to send a slow-moving shuttle through it, even though sending anything else through the conduits would have the same effect. Also, the flash freeze storms have stopped for no reason. Upon realising that sending unprotected shuttles through the conduits won't work, the Protoss guard these shuttles with a small air force, even though they have 3 large bases full of ground troops which would be more effective at clearing a path for the shuttles. This mission also has stasis chambers full of biomass, even though this moon has very little life on it, and the Protoss have no reason to connect biomass. You can end this mission by destroying all the shuttles, or by destroying all the docking bays, even though there's no reason why only shuttles can go through this portal, and the Protoss army still poses a threat to Kerrigan's base once all the shuttles have been destroyed. It should be noted that in a previous version of this mission, the shuttles were a feint to distract Kerrigan from a Protoss space vessel launching from the other side of the moon. While this does make the Protoss look less incompetent, It doesn't explain why they put all their warp conduits so close together. Finally, I believe this mission may have been based on the Brood Wars mission Emperor's Flight, where Rayna and Mengs escape the UED by travelling via Terran dropship through a warp gate. However, in that mission the dropship was to help characters escape, not send a message for help. On the Leviathan, Kerrigan orders a brood mother to destroy a planet for being a hub of Dominion military production. Then Kerrigan decides to continue fighting the Protoss rather than run from the Golden Armada. Kaldir Mission 3. Enemy Within. In order to eliminate the remaining Protoss, Kerrigan infests Lasara with a parasite, then removes a barrier so Lasara is teleported onto the Protoss ship. Lasara then emerges in an unguarded room and is killed by the parasite. However, since none of the Protoss seem interested in the Protoss they just walked in, even though she could be injured, no one checks on her. Kerrigan then has the larva consume all the animals on the ship. Despite Kaldir having very little life, there's numerous animals on this ship, even though there's no reason for the Protoss colonists to take these animals on their ship. A sentry finds Zerg creep but doesn't alert any other Protoss to a potential Zerg infestation. The larva then infests the giant Ursidon, which causes the force field holding it to disappear. The Zealots then notice that the giant Ursidon is infested, but don't alert any other Protoss to a Zerg infestation. The larva then morphs into a brood mother called Nadria, who spawns some Zerg, makes the Protoss realise that there's a Zerg invasion, consumes more animals, then destroys the warp drive. With the warp drive destroyed and the Protoss fully aware that they're under attack, the Protoss decide to release a few units from stasis, wait for them to die, then release a few more units, rather than release their entire army all at once to deal with a major threat. After eradicating all the Protoss, Nadia realises the ship has moved out of Kerrigan's range, even though the warp drive was destroyed before she lost contact with Kerrigan. Kerrigan then leaves Nidra in this ship, never to be mentioned again, even though Kerrigan should know approximately where the ship was and could have travelled to it using the Leviathan. In the cutscene, Kerrigan says the Golden Armada will never know she was here. However, given that the Protoss fought Zerg on Kaldir before Kerrigan arrived, and the Protoss will notice that the colony is no longer responding, they are likely to assume the colonists were killed by Zerg. Conclusion. The premise for these missions makes little sense. While Nafash going to Kaldir to improve her swarm made some sense, it makes no sense for the Protoss colonists to go to an almost lifeless moon, so far away from Shakuras, decide to fight the Zerg army on this moon without calling for reinforcements, gather a huge amount of biomass and animals for no reason, put all their warp conduits outside their base, put all their Psi-link spires in an area where their entire army will be periodically frozen, ignore all the frozen Zerg and Zerg bases, then try to fight Kerrigan's army. It's also odd that the Protoss didn't know that Kerrigan had been made human, or didn't have her full swarm since half the Dominion fleet is currently attacking Char. Given that Kerrigan is a major threat to the Protoss, and Char is Kerrigan's main base, the Protoss should have been monitoring this planet. Kerrigan's decision in the first mission to go to Nefash's base with almost no Zerg was idiotic because she could have been overwhelmed by Nefash or the Protoss. At least in the Char missions, Kerrigan had the sense to build a base before confronting Zagara. In addition, if Kerrigan hadn't gone down to Kaldir and instead sent her swarm to investigate Nefash's base, then the Protoss would never have known she was there, and she wouldn't have needed to kill them all. Kerrigan's decision to kill all the Protoss because she failed to take any steps to hide her presence just makes her look stupid and evil, especially since she let so many wounded Terrans live during the Char missions. In conclusion, the Protoss acted idiotically, because if they didn't, they'd wipe out Kerrigan's army, and the gimmicks in the first two levels, flash freeze storms and weakly guarded shuttles, exist to weaken the Protoss even further. Kerrigan is once again shown to be evil and indifferent to the suffering of others, so it's difficult to empathise with her in any way. While these missions didn't destroy the lore in the same way that the Xeris missions did, they still rely too much on gimmicks and have a weaker plot than the Char and Xeris missions.